Jax Rogan, a roguish human smuggler, had seen his fair share of oddities in the galaxy, but nothing compared to the location. A beautiful humanoid alien appeared before him amid the rolling dunes of Xeno's heyday, a woman with glistening golden hair crouched next to her crying pets, whose lives were rapidly coming to an end under the Jax has a decision to make after landing on this abandoned planet's ruthless heat. Rock to drop down quickly. Not to play hero, but to convey the alien's dazzling blue. Desperation. Against his better judgment, Jax went over to the trio and said, "Hey there, sweetie, it looks like you." His gaze pulled at his heartstrings. The alien woman looked up in surprise and blinks away when he calls out, his most endearing smile blazing. "Please, my darlings are dying and need water." She is crying, and her beautiful lashes are shimmering. Jax took a quick look at the pet animals, which looked like enormous blue lions with glistening fur, and were lying on the he knew he didn't have much water left. But he couldn't let them perish, so he sanded their tongues, sighing. He took his canteen off his belt and gave it to the alien, saying, "This is all I have. Make it count." With trembling hands, she accepted the canteen. A shock of electricity appeared to strike her as her thin fingers touched his, go between them at the contact. "Thank you," she said in a sweet, appreciative voice, as Jax was unable to stop staring at the extraterrestrial as he carefully poured water into its jaws. Her skin was captivating, with exquisite features and contours that even her ragged clothes couldn't cover off after the creatures had consumed their drinks. Her golden tresses revealed pointy ears that were a shade of sky blue, their eyes gleaming. The alien returned the empty canteen to Jax and stated, "I will always be indebted to you. Gratitude. I am Naria of the Andari, and these are my cherished friends, the enormous cats Nyx and Azura, who have been brought back to life." One of them Nexus patted closer as they looked at Jax with interested sapphire eyes. Jax tentatively sniffed at his palm before reaching out and caressing the creature's smooth fur, admiring its otherworldly appearance. Softness. Jax Rogan, who introduced himself, continued to pet Nyx, which adds a lovely Xeno's prime. Nara's visage clouded when he said, "It's like you to a wasteland. My ship crashed here 2 cycles ago, that we've been stuck ever since, barely making it through." She looked at her friends, Nyx and Azura, with concern. "Water is abundant in Daria, and we are accustomed to such hard conditions in our home world." Jax's forehead furrowed. He knew he should return to his ship and abandon this terrible situation, but the idea of leaving Naria and her animals in the harsh desert didn't set well with him. "I have a ship nearby, here." He found himself offering to drive you to the closest spaceport and possibly even fetch you some more water. Naria's eyes widened at the thought of you doing that for us. "But why you?" Jax shrugged and tried to act calm, saying, "Don't even know me. Let's just say that I have a thing for damsels." Anguish, particularly the golden-haired, blue-skinned type, causing Naria's cheeks to slightly flush, making her even more seductive. "I'm at a loss for words." "Thank you, Jax Rogan. Your generosity will not to be forgotten." Jax couldn't get rid of the feeling that his life had suddenly taken a turn for the worse as they started the trek back to his ship. Turned for an intricate yet quick look at Naria's elegant figure with her majestic companions, and he was certain that he had taken the right decision. The desert sun mercilessly hammered them as Jack was too focused on his thoughts to notice the heat as he walked. He encountered several women around the galaxy, but none quite compared to the mysterious alien woman at his side, similar to Naria. She exuded an aura of majesty and royalty that complemented her current situation with NX and Azura. Jax had to walk behind their mistress, their keen eyes searching the dunes for any indication of danger. Admit that as they got closer to his spacecraft, the stellar rogue Jax, they created a breathtaking sight that looked like something from a fairy tale. Felt uneasy because he wasn't used to having passengers, much less ones as impressive. As a part of him feared that he was overcommitting and that this deed of generosity would backfire. But as Naria turned to face him, her eyes were glimmering with appreciation and something more he couldn't quite put his finger on. Jax dismissed her reservations, saying he had promised to aid her and would follow his word because she didn't have much to. As they got closer to the stellar rogue, he whispered, "Look at. She'll get us where we need to go." Naria cocked her head, examining the batter freighter with interest. She remarked gently, "I think she's perfect." Jax experienced an unexplainable at her words. He felt a surge of warmth in his chest. He entered the access code, and the ship's ramp descended with a welcoming hiss. He motioned for Nari and her friends to get on board. As they entered the ship, Jax's cold cabin couldn't get rid of the sensation that his life had abruptly changed, and he was unaware of how accurate he was. As the stellar rogue sailed beyond the starry reaches of space, Jax felt himself drawn more and more to Naras. Together, they talked about their worlds and their exploits for several hours in the ship's cockpit. She told the story of Anaria, a lush, green world where water flowed freely and her people coexisted peacefully with the environment. The glittering lakes, the lush gardens where she played as a child, and the magnificent crystal towers of her family's palace where Nyx and Azora enjoyed swimming together, and Jax entertained her with tales of his narrow escapes and smuggling adventures and the bold thefts. He discovered that he was sharing his suffering with her in a way he had never done before. As the days stretched into weeks, Jax saw that his affections for Naria had returned, along with the dreams he had long ago buried, that expanded beyond simple desire. He began to want for her company, the sound of her laughter, and her touch of her hand. Yet there was a cloud over their developing relationship because Nari had been vague about the causes. One evening as they sat in the car, and Jax couldn't get rid of the impression that she was concealing something. When Jax finally brought up the topic in the dimly lit galley of the ship, he stated quietly, "I know there's something you're notifying me, that I can see it in your eyes." Naria tensed up and looked down at the table. Jax, "I'm not sure if I can." He extended his hand and covered her hand as she took a long breath and said, "Hey, whatever it is, you can trust me. I'm here for you." I shivered and then looked into his eyes, realizing that I'm more than simply a Naria. Of the Jax's eyes widened as he said, "I am Princess Naria, heir to the throne of Anaria." However, he said nothing, allowing her to go on. "I was engaged to a warlord from a nearby system who was a ruthless and vicious man named Dex Vortex. It was a political agreement intended to stabilize our space zone, but tears filled her bright eyes as she realized she couldn't carry it out, couldn't consign herself to a life of suffering and oppression. Dies. So I got Aora and Enwex and rushed away in the middle of the night. But Dex's my ship was shot down above Xenos Prime by troops pursuing us, and I'm now afraid." Jax's heart tightened at the pain in her voice, and he clutched her hand in an attempt to stop them from pursuing me, to express his assistance with a straightforward gesture. "Naria, I had no clue I was." So she offered him a tearful grin and said, "I'm sorry you had to go through that. You've already done more for me than I could ever repay. You saved my life, Jax, and I can't ask you to put yourself in my loved one's shoes." Jax shook his head fiercely, determined to protect me from danger. "You're not asking, I'm offering, and I'll be damned if I allow a power-hungry jerk to touch you. Or your pet's." Naria's eyes glowed with appreciation for something more profound that caused Jax's heart to race. "Thank you," she said in a tremulous voice as the spacecraft approached. When Jax jumped to his feet, the alarm went off, shattering, and his hand automatically went to the blaster at his hip. "We've gained companionship," he snarled, and his pupils narrowed. On the view screen, a threatening cruiser emerged from hyperspace. When Jax saw the insignia, his blood froze. The hull was armed. They located us in Naria, with a crimson fist of Dex Vortex imprinted on its side. Nyx and Azora ran to her side with their hackles up as she inhaled, her face going pale, having their teeth exposed. Jax's brain whirled as they calculated their choices, outmatched and outgunned, but he assured her that he would be damned if he allowed Vortex to take Nari without a battle strap. That Grimm's voice warned Jax that things would become rough as he slid into the pilot's seat, with Nara's fate at stake. He found himself willing to take a chance, even though he was facing the battle of his life. Jax's hands flew over as he did all in his power to protect her, even if it meant giving up his freedom or his life. The Star Rogue navigates the ship amid a flurry of laser fire. His forehead is wrinkled in concentration. Jack yelled above the D of the D as Vortex's vessel loomed behind them, its armor banging against their shields. Nyx and Aora crowded around the co-pilot's seat, and Naria, strapped in, nodded grimly. "Alarms, I'm going to do something wild." Jack used a DA technique to send the Stellar Rogue into a dizzying spin, sending her feet and eyes wide with panic. He sped for a dense asteroid field that lay ahead after dodging a barrage of missiles and activating the afterburners. "Jax, are you crazy up ahead?" Naria's knuckles turned white as she clutched the armrest. "We'll be crushed. Believe me," Jack answered in a firm voice. Despite the Stellar Rogue's descent into the asteroid field was worse than the thrill rushing through his veins, using heart-stopping precision Vortex's ship, which is overly big and heavy, to weave and dodge around the falling rocks trailed behind its weapon's fire, reducing as it attempted to traverse the dangerous terrain. Jax gave a triumphant whoop as they came out on the other side of the field. Narya saged back in her seat with satisfaction. "That'll teach that bastard to mess with us," engraved on her stunning face, Jax said. "That was amazing. I've never seen flying like that." Jax smiled, her heart bursting with pride. "Princess, stay with me and I'll protect you." As they placed, Jack looked at the star charts to find a location to hide as they got farther away from Vortex's ship. And regroup. He pointed to a familiar set of coordinates, and a light of hope ignited in his breast. "We will hide out at a small, unremarkable asteroid on the map. It is an ancient mining site that has been abandoned for many years. I moved forward to study the readout, and I used to use it as a cache for my smuggling missions." "Are you certain it's?" Jax retorted. "Safer than out here," adding that Vortex wouldn't consider searching for us there. Additionally, as a stellar rogue approached the asteroid, the facility's defenses should buy us some time, even if he does. Because he hadn't visited the mining plant in years, not since his early childhood, Jax experienced a flood of nostalgia. It brought up memories of his past as a smuggler, both positive and negative. When the ship landed, dust clouds were created by the asteroid's scarred surface. Jax shut off the engine and his face softening, he replied, "Welcome to my home away from home." Attempting to bring some humor into Narya forced a tiny grin in response to his words, but Jax could see the concern in her eyes. Now that Jax has stood up and extended his hand to her, "What should we do?" "We strengthen our together." They positioned themselves and devised a plan before leaving the spacecraft NX, with Aora padding alongside them. The mining plant, with its worn and corroded metal structures, towered over them as labored to strengthen the facility's defenses, and Jax was astounded by Nara's tenacity and resolve, her beautiful complexion smeared with oil, and her delicate hands became calloused as she threw herself into the chores at hand. Late into the night, Jax discovered them, huddled around a tiny heater in the evenings, sharing their meager supplies and conversing. He was sharing his dreams, regrets, concerns, and hopes with her in ways he had never done before, and as the days stretched into weeks, a bond between them developed that went beyond simple. It was a link created in the crucible of adversity, a love that blazed hot against the cold. Whether it was friendship or infatuation. Backdrop of space. One evening, while they sat and observed the stars through the observation dome of the institution, she whispered to Jax, her voice shaking, her eyes glimmering with emotion, "Without you, I don't know what I would have done. You've given me hope when I was at my weakest." Jax's throat tightened with emotion as his heart grew weakest. "I would do anything for you. You've given me a purpose to fight and demonstrated that life is about more than just surviving." Then, at an instant of complete clarity, they met, their lips forming a kiss that promised to last forever as their embrace seemed to erase the galaxy and its dangers, leaving only them amidst the stars and the love they had discovered. But even as they celebrated their newfound happiness, Jax was aware that the shadow of Jack vowed that when the time came, they would have to confront the warlord once more. Since Vortex was still looming over them, he promised himself that he would be prepared and fight to the death to keep Narya safe in the priceless bond they shared, because he would follow her to the ends of the world, since she was his star and his guiding light in the blackness of space. Jax and Nara made their way through the narrow hallways of the little building. They discovered a secret room located deep beneath the heart of the asteroids was revealed when the entrance, which had been shut for generations, hissed open as they approached. The sight before them was breathtaking. A verdant oasis, a self-sufficient ecology flourishing amid the towering trees with shimmering leaves stretched toward an artificial sky in the center of the desolate asteroid, while as the crystal-clear stream twisted through the thick greenery, Narya's eyes widened in amazement at wonder. "Jax, this is amazing. I have never witnessed anything like it." NX and Aura had been helpless and frail during the severe when they saw the oasis. The conditions of space awoke, and they jumped forward, diving into the cool air with joy. Jax couldn't help but smile at their excitement as they invited water. "Well dang, it looks like we found ourselves tiny piece of heaven." As they strolled about the oasis, taking in the exotic plants and animals that Jax was unable to. His instincts, developed over years of smuggling, informed him that they weren't being observed, yet he couldn't shake the notion alone. His suspicions were validated when a man with a blaster aimed at Jax's chest appeared out of the shadows. The newcomer was a grizzled man with eyes that were drawn. His face was worn from years of harsh life. If it's not Jax Rogan, I'm narrowing because I thought I recognized your ship, Raz Carrick. I should have known you'd arrive sooner. His hand crept toward his own blaster, but he maintained his composure afterwards. Narya glanced between the two men, her delicate features etched with confusion. Jax, who is this Jack's sidekick? Shoulder-drooping Raz is a long-time friend of mine with whom I ran in the past before going it alone, shouted a laugh that sounded harsh. And is that what you call grading? You duped me, Rogan, and left me feeling euphoric. Jax's eyes flashed with rage, and his jaw tightened on that job in the Orion Belt. You're one to talk about double. You turned me out to the Galactic Patrol, Carrick, and I just managed to get away with my. As the two men looked at one another, Narya moved forward and spoke in a calm yet forceful tone, saying, "Gentlemen, please, there are enough problems without us battling." Raz's eyes widened in awareness as he turned to face Nia. "Sweetheart Jack, you have quite the bounty on your head, and I'll be damned if it's not the Princess of Anaria herself." Raz snorted his head as he moved in front of Narya, protecting her by backing away from Carrick. "From where I'm standing, it appears that you're just using the term blaster never-wavering protection." Narya put a soft hand on Jax's arm and touched it for your own benefit. Jax has put everything on the line to protect me. He is a decent man nonetheless, what his past may hold. Raz looked at them for a while, his face impassive, and then he lowered his well. "Isn't that sweet? Jack's story of the smuggler and the princess is just another fairy tale." Blaster's smile is pulling at his lips. His shoulders loosened a little, but he remained alert. "What do you want?" Carrick Moraz asked, gesturing to the oasis surrounding them. "Likewise, you want Rogan to have a spot to rest and replenish his supplies. This asteroid is the ideal hideout, and the water is." Jax's eyes narrowed. "And I assume you want to know what a precious item these pieces are." Raz shrugged, a grin spreading across his worn features to claim it for himself, since the two men's tension reached a boiling point. "Can you blame me? A guy has to earn a livelihood," intervened once more. "Maybe we could reach a consensus to divide this oasis riches instead of squabbling over them." Raz thoughtfully stroked his chin as he pondered about what she had said. "The princess is right, Rogan. We could both use a." Jax was reluctant to cooperate, weighing his instincts against his need to protect Narya. "Eventually," he nodded, expression guarded well. "But I'm keeping an eye on you, Carrick. One mistake, and they're off to build a." Despite the armistice and resource division in the oasis, Jax couldn't get rid of the suspicion that Raz was concealing something. Smooth was too keen to strike a deal, but for the time being he was forced to comply because Narya and her friends needed that. He would only need to closely monitor Raz and be prepared for anything as the oasis supplied water and the reception. As the days went by, Jax and Nara settled into a routine of attending to the oasis's residents. Nyx and Aura. Flourish live in the lush setting, regaining their energy and strength every day. One evening, Jax, when he heard a splash coming from the direction of the stream while patrolling the oasis perimeter, he became inquisitive and moved toward it. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Narya standing waist-deep in the thick undergrowth. Straining toward the sound, moonlight danced across her azure skin as her golden hair fell down her bare back in the crystal-clear water, giving off an ethereal radiance. Jax was captivated by her beauty, even though he knew he should turn aside to respect her solitude. As if sensing his presence, the water rippled around her like silk as she moved with an almost supernatural grace. For a brief minute, they just stared at each other in the air while Narya's eyes widened in surprise. They were electrically tense, and then gradually a smile appeared on Narya's face, her eyes glimmering. "When mischief decided to accompany me." Jax Rogan abruptly swallowed hard, dry. He was aware that he should fight to keep their distance, but the temptation was too strong, so he grinned, undressed, and waited in the stream's refreshing embrace. When AB arrived at Narya, she put her arms around his neck and molded her body to his worn soul, like a missing puzzle piece beneath the asteroid's twin moons. They were engrossed in one another's passion. A fire that was momentarily unquenchable. All the risks and all the unknowns of the galaxy disappeared, leaving just the two of them in their odd love encounter. But Jax kept thinking that it was all too good to be true, even as they savored their moment of stolen happiness. Since Raz's true intentions were still unknown and somewhere out their vortex was still pursuing them, They must be prepared for any obstacles that may arise. Their love and intelligence are their main defenses against the threats of the galaxy. But for the time being, they had one other, and that was all Jax needed, the impression that something was wrong with Raz because the man was too eager and prepared to comply. Following their first, his instincts were on high alert as he found himself attentively observing Raz out of animosity. After a long day of taking care of the oasis, Jax heard a conversation as he was returning to the living quarters that evening as he approached. His attention was piqued by the quiet chatter emanating from Raz's chamber. The princess and her creatures are hiding out on an abandoned mining site, and I'm straining to make out the words. Raz, you deliver the reward, and I'll give it to you without any questions. Jax's blood turned cold. Even though he knew he shouldn't be shocked in the world of Vortex, the betrayal of selling them out to him still hurt, since loyalty was a scarce resource among smugglers and scoundrels. He briefly contemplated storming into the room and facing Raz head-on, but he was aware that would only result in a firefight, which would put Nari and her friends in danger. Jax took a deep breath, collected himself, and knocked. At risk, no. He needed to play this clever by time for their escape. The talk within quickly stopped at Raz's door, and a moment later Raz emerged, his face guarding Rogan. Jax's tone was casual, but he forced a smile to let you know that Nara and I are making some plans. What do you want? Tomorrow's trip to the asteroid's far side is planned because we believe there may be some valuable or deposits there. Raz squinted, but he nodded slowly. Well, don't let me keep you, he said. I had some work to do. So Jax gave him a shoulder clap, but his hold was a bit too firm. Of course, Jax's thoughts were racing as he left, and before he knew it, he had to get Nari and her friends off this rock darn quick. But he was also aware that Raz would be observing everything they did in anticipation of the ideal opportunity to reset his trap. Jax discovered Naria caring for Nyx and Azura in their shared quarters, her thin fingers gliding through their smooth fur. Jax, I was just about to enter when she looked up, her grin warming his heart. So come find you. Nyx and Azura have been so playful today that I believe they are finally returning to their former selves. Once more, they're puppies. And Jax's look must have shown his internal conflict, because a worried expression took the place of Naria's smile. What's wrong? Something happened, and he sighed while stroking his hair. It was Raz, and he was going to turn us out to Vortex. Naria's eyes widened as she heard him make the plans, and her hand flew to her mouth. No, I thought he was. Jax shook his head sadly, realizing that we're all in this together. Leopards don't change their locations. Nara. Raz is protecting himself as usual, and she stood by him. Jax shook his head in agreement. So we must depart right once before he gets a chance to deceive us. Create a strategy. I have a plan, but it's dangerous, so we'll have to divide up, and as we make our escape, Raz believes we're still here. Naria's brow wrinkled, but she nodded. I trust you, Jax. Whatever you. Jax couldn't help but marvel at Nara's strength and tenacity as they put their plan into action. Despite having lost everything and going through a lot, she found the strength to keep fighting and hope that he would come through. I love you, Naria, and I'll always support you. He closed his lips and found hers in a desperate, passionate kiss. She clutched to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, saying, Always fight for you, for us. I love you more than I ever imagined, Jax. They said goodbye with a last lingering kiss before parting ways, each taking one of Jax. One of Nara's friends, watched her vanish into the twisting hallways of the mining site. His heart ached knowing that he might not see her again, but he ignored those feelings and concentrated on the objective at hand. Required him to come up with a distraction that would keep Raz busy, while Nari and Aura made their. Jack used his understanding of the facility's layout to find his way to the shuttle bay. That was located on the asteroid's far side, placing a number of little explosives in key places and setting them up to explode remotely. Then, with Nyx by his side, he set up shop close to the oasis entrance, so he didn't have to wait long. Raz showed up with mercenaries with heavy weapons, trained on Jax. Where is Princess Rogan? Don't try any of your tricks. I have a little wealth riding on this transaction. Jack grinned icily. She's Carrick, you're long gone. With a flick of his wrist, he set off the explosives, causing the blast to rattle in the midst of the pandemonium. Jax and Nyx raced towards the asteroid and sent debris crashing down on the oasis. They saw Narya and Azura waiting for them in the underground shuttle bay. With the shuttle prepared for launch, Jax felt a pang of remorse for the paradise they were leaving behind as they were blown away from the asteroid behind. But as he saw Enar's hand firmly clasped in his, he realized that he had discovered something much more valuable. A love that would last through all the galaxy threw at them in the days ahead that ensued. Jax and Nara became closer as they increased their separation from the asteroid. They spent lengthy conversations in which they shared their aspirations for the future, and when they made love, it was passionately. Jax couldn't get enough of Narya because of the intensity that left them both gasping for air and the sensation of her blue skin under his palms. Even Nyx and Azura appeared to notice the shift in her golden hair as it spread out on the pillow. Friendship, the way their tails curled up together in happy sleep linked. But Jax was aware that Vortex was still out there, and that they now had Raz to deal with as he dealt with the betrayal. Jax knew he would do whatever it took to punish the MANs. They set off to explore the outer rim. Jax couldn't get rid of the sensation that their journey was only beginning, but knowing Narya at his side, he knew he could overcome any obstacles. Because she was his, he would follow her to the ends of the universe and beyond as the star of his guiding light in the depths of space. Jax and Nari pored over the evidence they had gathered their hearts on as Stellar Rogue bound across space, racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. The files Raz had inadvertently contributed were a priceless find, a mountain of devastating evidence that paints a vivid picture of Vortex's actual character. In the depths of her voice quivered with anger as she added, "Betrayal. He's not just a warlord, Neris. Look at this. A monster that has been planning to kill royal family members to make room for his own consent to authority." Jax nodded grimly. His mouth tightened in anger. "And those dishonest, the people who set up your marriage, are also involved and stand to benefit financially and politically if Vortex takes." The termination flashed in Throne Narya's eyes. "We must stop them. Jax must reveal their betrayal and rescue Anaria from their grasp." Jax his with a heart full of respect for her bravery. He clasped her hand in his and said, "We'll make them pay for what they completed it, and we completed it together." As they got closer to Anaria, Jax and Nara realized they needed to go fast, so they landed the Stellar Rogue in a remote canyon out of sight and traveled to the capital city. While hiding in darkness's first destination was the palace, where they were smuggled into the center of the royal compound by Nari's devoted guards. Narya spoke to her fans in a private room that was only accessible to a select few, her voice resonating with she sobbed, "Righteous fury, my people. I have serious news for you. The man who would be my spouse, Vortex, the warlord, is a traitor and would-be killer who wants to topple our government and use dishonest officials who have violated their oaths to help him gain power for himself." Causing a hush of the packed crowd's features were marked with incredulity and hatred as shock and outrage shook them. "But we won't allow their success." Narya kept going, her eyes flashing with resolve, "and we'll reveal their wrongdoings and bring them to justice. And we'll accomplish it as a single people bound by our shared devotion to freedom and our love for Andoria. And justice." The audience cheered, their voices rising in a chorus of solidarity and support. Jax's heart was overflowing. We have proof that he proudly moved forward to stand next to Nari. His hand resting on the hilt of his blaster, he claimed that Vortex had betrayed him by displaying a data pad with confidential financial documents. "We will show this evidence to communications, including intentions for a royal family assassination attempt. We, along with the people of Anaria, will insist that Vortex and his accomplices face consequences for their crimes." The throng erupted in applause. Eager to take to the streets and proclaim Vortex's treachery, Jax and Narya led the charge. Nyx and Azura ran at their tails, their hearts racing with excitement. A fire of revolution swept over Anaria in the days that followed, and the proof of Vortex's atrocities was placed in public squares and carried on all news channels, igniting indignation and demands for justice. The dishonest officials who had plotted with Vortex were hauled out of their offices from all around the world and made to face the wrath of those they had deceived. Some of them ran away in an attempt to avoid the repercussions of their actions, of their deeds, but the majority were apprehended and put on trial, their guilt exposed for everyone to see, including Vortex himself. He invaded the palace with a few devoted followers in a last-ditch futile bid to take control. Soldiers used an iron fist to suppress the rebellion and take Narya by force, but Jax and Narya were prepared. For him, they confronted Vortex's Soldiers head on with the assistance of their allies and the backing of the Andoran people, with their souls ablaze with flames of righteous rage and their weapons blazing. Narya ultimately hit the final strike. She threw Vortex to the ground where he was standing, his corpse crumpling to the ground with a yell of wrath and a flare of her blaster as the smoke dissipated and the dust settled. Narya turned to face her people, looking like a puppet with its strings cut. She spoke in a voice that was shaking with emotion, and Daria's eyes were bright with unshed tears, free to follow its own path, free from corruption and oppression, and create a peaceful, prosperous future for everybody. The audience cheered, their voices rising in unison, with happiness and victory. Jax's heart, overflowing with pride and love, swept across Narya as the tears fell from their eyes. She was held close by him in his arms. In the weeks that followed, Anaria went through transition. The dishonest officials lost their wealth and influence, and their illicit gains were transferred to the individuals they had persecuted. The parliament was disbanded, and a new administration led by Narya head and Jax by her side, and their love only grew more intense during that time. Were a group that formed a partnership in the heat of combat and was strengthened by their unwavering dedication to one another. Twilight, while they watched the twin moons rise over the capital city of Narya from the balcony of their private rooms, she murmured, her voice low, with a malicious gleam in her eye, turning to Jax. "Yet, they're still the subject of our wedding," Jax said, raising his eyebrows in surprise and grinning as he tugged at he blushed a delicate shade of purple at the corners of his mouth. "Oh, I assumed it was just a cover tale. Perhaps it began that way when she moved in close and pressed a hot breath on his ear. But I've been wondering why allow a perfectly good." Jax's pulse, thumping with unexpected hunger, drew her into his lap, his hands wandering over the wedding. "And the good wedding was a waste. Are you implying the curves of her body?" Her eyes, which are blazing with fire, nodded slowly. "I'm Jax, and I want you to be my spouse and partner in every way possible. I want to rule Anaria alongside you. Explore the galaxy while holding it in your arms. What do you think, Jax?" His smile is growing when her lips finally parted. His tongue sank deep into the delicious corners of her mouth in a fiery kiss. He pressed his forehead against hers, both of them heated and panting, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Yes, Nara," he said, "I can't wait to spend the rest of my life making you happy because I love you more than life itself." A magnificent fusion of Andorian and human traditions, their wedding was a ceremony unlike any other. Jax was radiant in his when Nari looked magnificent. Garb, the finest smuggler, waited at the altar, his heart racing with excitement. Jax felt his breath catch in his throat as she appeared in a glittering silver gown. He couldn't believe she had picked him as he saw a vision of a deity manifested, of all individuals to be her life and love partner. Jax's voice trembled with emotion as they exchanged vows. Dot believed that his destiny had been accomplished, and that he was destined to be by Narita's side forever in the joyful yips of Nyx. The reception was a jovial affair with music and laughter. Jax put his arm around Enya's waist as they walked between the guests' legs, couldn't stop grinning. His heart was so full of joy and love that he feared it could explode when the celebrations came to an end. Down as the visitors started to nod out, Jax and Narya retired to their rooms, ready to start a new life together. However, when they collapsed into one another's embraces, they were startled by a scratching sound at the door, which caused Jack to moan and exasperated. He pulled himself free of Ina's embrace and strode to the door, pushed it open, and saw a very Nyx and Azora appear bashful, and their tails are wagging. "Hopefully, this won't happen right now, if you understand what I mean." Nyx remains unfazed. He spoke in a firm yet polite tone, telling the princess, "I need some alone time." Attempted to shove him into the room, but Jax resisted, using his body to block the doorway. "Listen up, you two princesses. And since I'm a little busy right now, how about you go chase squirrels or whatever while sipping a final glass of somber wine, Nyx?" Jax shook his head as Aora, and she slunk away, their tails dooming in despair, amusedly shut the door firmly behind them and faced Nara once again. His eyes blazing with passion. Were we the ones who snarled and stalked toward the bed with the intention of killing her? Her voice was a deep murmur, and her eyes were heavy and flushed as she invited him closer. "I think you're going to make me the happiest woman in the galaxy, my darling." Jax jumped on the bed with a broad smile. "Your wish is my command, my queen," he said, pressing Narya under him with his weight, as they lost themselves in each other's bodies, sending steaming kisses down the thin column of her throat. Jax knew that he had discovered his real home after relocating to perfect harmony, purpose. He could tackle anything the universe threw at him with Narya by his side. They emerged stronger and healthier after working together, that alliance tempered by the unshakable bond of their love and forged in the crucible of adversity together. They would create a promising future full of love, adventure, and limitless possibilities. The galaxy's wonders.